Welcome everyone to the 2021 Virtual SMA Conference. This is Sarah from Cure SMA's Family Support Department, and we thank you all so much for joining us for the EnABLE Act, EnABLE Savings for Life session today. We're grateful for our national presenting sponsors, Biogen, Genentech, and Novartis Gene Therapies for their incredible support of this year's Virtual SMA Conference. Please note that all lines will remain muted during the session other than for the speaker. If you have any questions, please find the chat conversation tab located on the right-hand side of your screen. You can submit questions throughout the session using this feature, and we will have Q&A at the end. We would now like to introduce our presenter today, Marianne Ellert with Protected Tomorrows. Welcome, Marianne.
Hello, everyone. I am happy to be here today with you.
Have you on mute?
Oh, I'm okay. Everybody can hear me? Great. So I am happy to be with you all today, and we're going to be talking about some exciting new information for you. Some of you may know it already.
I still show you on mute, Marianne.
I am. It says I am not. I am not on mute according to this. So you should be able to hear me now. Let's see if there's something else going on.
We can hear you.
Okay, you can hear me now?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, not sure what's happening. Hi, again, so we'll get started with the EnABLE Act. There's some new legislation over the last couple of years that allows us to, those who have disabilities, save tax-free, and it's a great tool. And I know that when it first came out years ago, it was very confusing, and it probably still is. It's probably one of the things where I get the most questions about how to use this. So I'm going to be speaking about it from the perspective of if you are the person with a disability, or if you're a family member of a person with a disability, how you might use this tool. So it came about a couple of years ago when the EnABLE Act passed, and what it was an amendment to some legislation called the Section 529 of the IRS Code to create this way for an individual to save for themselves. And the purpose of it was to encourage savings. Up to this point, a person with a disability who had government benefits can only have $2,000 in their name. And it was the most, it still is that limit, right? It's a silly law, but it's what we have to do in order to get the benefits. So many years ago in DC, we started talking about this, and it started and went through many iterations. And I think it's one of the few legislative acts that I've seen so many people support. But there's still a lot of confusion about it. So it's a federal law, and the federal government, the Treasury, manages it. But what they do is, just like 529s, they pass it down to the state, and each state had to decide if they were going to offer this to people in their state. So we're going to talk about how they work. We're going to talk about the federal laws and how they apply. They are different by state, but the federal law overrides everything else. Some states have an EnABLE Act, some states do not. Some states will say my EnABLE Act can be used by anybody in any state. Some states say my EnABLE Act can be used only by the people in my state. And some states say I'm not going to have an EnABLE. So once we get done, I'll show you how you can find out about your state and what your state offers. But no matter where you're using it, these rules are going to apply. So they recognize at some point that a person with a disability has extra expenses that a person without a disability may have. But yet with the government benefits, and we'll kind of tie that together of how it works, but you're only allowed to have $2,000 in your savings, and that doesn't make sense at all. So this EnABLE Act allows us to save money in our names if we have a disability, and it does not impact our SSI or our Medicaid. So it's a great tool. So I'm going to talk about the basic rules, and I'm going to go through each one of these. So, but there's some tax-free savings, how you can use it, who's eligible, what are the rules to use it, and how many a person can have of these accounts, and how much can you contribute, and what's the maximum amount. So let's take one of those things at a time. So the first thing is tax-free savings. So everybody likes to not pay taxes. So this is a way that you can put money in it, and it's tax-free, but there's some rules that you have to follow. One, when you take the money out, it can grow tax-free, but when you take the money out, it's only tax-free if you used it for the approved expenses. And we're going to talk about in detail what those are, but they are very broad. So approved expenses the law says it's supposed to be to support a person's disability. But over time, what it's become to mean is if it's used for something that betters the life of a person with a disability, that's qualified. Okay. The other thing is if you take it out and it's not used for approved expenses, it would be taxable instead of tax-free, and there would be a 10% penalty for using it. So let's say what would be an unapproved expense. So if you put money into your account or your child's account into this ABLE account, and it was for yourself or your family member who has a disability, and you didn't use it for yourself, but you used it for somebody else, that would not be allowed expense. Okay. So therefore that money, if it had growth, it would be taxable and it would have a 10% penalty. So just knowing the rules of you're setting it up, who's it for, they're going to use it for their betterment, and then you're within the rules. So again, what are these approved expenses? Very broad: education, housing, transportation, employment training, support, assistive technology, personal support services, healthcare, financial management, what else could there be besides these, right? People say, well, I want to go to the movie. Can I use it for that? Yes, that's okay. It improves your life. Can I buy a computer? Of course you can. All of those kind of things. It's pretty hard to find something that's not approved unless you're doing it for someone else that is not that doesn't have a disability. So there's one person who this is for, and it needs to be used for them. Like basic approved expenses. Another rule is it must be for a person who had a disability that was they were disabled and determined to be disabled before the age of 26. So where did this rule come from? This rule came from they were trying to avoid this benefit to be used by someone who's 70 years old and has dementia and they're hiding their money. Okay, that was kind of the mindset behind it. 26 is kind of young, but because some people do become disabled at a later age, but it's set at 26 right now. There's some legislation on their table. They're trying to make that older, but you need to know what the rules are today. Okay, so how do you prove that? How do you prove you have a disability? You have SSI. B, you have SSDI. C, you're on the compassionate allowance list. There's a lot of disabilities that are on this list, and it's automatically considered a disability. Or you self-certify. So what does that mean? It says when you do the application, because these are all state programs, and all states have them set up online. So how do you get one? You go online to get it. So when you answer the questions, you can say, yes, I have SSI. Yes, I have SSDI. Yes, I'm on the compassionate allowance list. Or I'm self-certifying. I'm telling you that I have a disability. So how do they check that? Right now, they don't. However, if you put money in here and then later on it was used for a specific, you're using it, but it became clear, and so they audited you, that's when they're going to come back and say, prove it, right? But I haven't seen anybody using this who shouldn't use it today. So I'm sure that everything that could be, any rules that could be broken could be, but this is the rule today. Okay. Other things you need to know: one account per person. So this is part of the college savings plan, right? The 529s are college savings plans. So this is a little different in that it's not for college, it's for special needs planning for our life. So in a 529 account, grandma can set one up for me, my parents could set one up for me, but an ABLE account can only have one account. So I can only have one ABLE account. My son, if I was setting it up for him, he can only have one ABLE account. So he can't set one up for himself, and I could also not set one up for him. So that's very clear. If someone already had one and somebody tried to set up another one, it would get kicked out because the Social Security numbers would match up, and they'd say, nope, they already have an account. Okay. And the state programs coordinate somewhat with the federal programs, right? So it's important to understand that if you think you could go to one state and get one into another state, they're going to talk to each other. And if everything goes to the IRS, they're definitely going to talk to each other, right? The most you can put into an ABLE account, if I wanted to, I'm setting up one for my son. I've set one up for him. The most that can go into his account per year is 15,000. That amount was set back in 2018, and it has been the same since. Okay, that number comes from the annual gifting amount, the amount that we are allowed to gift in the gifting rules in our country. and set by the IRS. So that $15,000 is the number. All right. So, and the maximum amount that can be put into the EnABLE account is the same amount that the state sets for 529 accounts. And in different states, some it's 300,000, some it's 400,000, some it's 450,000. So whichever state program you use defines how much, right? But it's a lot. So it's important to know those rules. Okay, what is it then? If it's this way that we can put money in, we can put 15,000 a year away, and we can use it pretty flexibly. Okay. How do we use it? What is it really? Because it's just a way we put money in. What do we do with it? So think of it as a tool. When we build a house or we build a table or we build something, we need tools. We need a hammer. We need a saw. And each of those tools has a specific way that it's going to be used. So this particular tool is one of the tools that we use. We're going to talk about that in context to other tools. It's very flexible. It's very accessible to everyone. If your state doesn't have one, there is a state that will let you have one. Okay. I live in Illinois, and Illinois is a consortium with 15 other states, and all those states kind of pool their resources together. So Illinois has one and another state one, and everybody's plan might be a little different, but we pooled the resources so that the fees can be lower, right? There are states like Wisconsin that doesn't have a 529 plan. But if I live in Wisconsin and I want to set up one for myself or my son, I could do it in Illinois. Okay. Could I set it up one in Florida? No, because Florida's plan says only Florida residents can use that plan. Okay. All right. It's a learning tool. What does that mean? So if we have a disability and we're only allowed to have $2,000 in our name, how do we learn to save? Because there's not a very good way for us to do that. So you're going to learn also that not only can we put to $15,000 in it, but the rules have changed a little bit. So a person who has a disability and who works can also put money in it over and above the 15,000. So it's a tool to those of us who maybe couldn't have money, can now have money, and it teaches us how to save. It's kind of like our retirement account. Okay. But it also makes sense in certain situations. And if you use it wrong, it's a way to get into trouble. So knowing the rules on how to use this tool, which is a great tool, is important. So let's talk about some of the old tools, right? There were some old rules and old tools. This EnABLE account lets us have new rules, but still use the old tools. So those of you who have disabilities or a family member with a disability know that we have limitations. There are benefits if I'm disabled that I'm eligible for. If I've paid into the system, I get this thing called SSDI, Social Security Disability, and it comes with Medicare. We've done a lot of sessions on this. But SSI and Medicaid are two of the benefits that people often have. And SSI and Medicaid have asset and income limitations. So we have an income limitation because we have a disability. But these are really important programs for us to keep. SSI gives us a check, and we have to prove that we have nothing more than a house, a car, a prepaid funeral, $2,000, and an EnABLE account. Now, that's EnABLE account is new to say we can have that. So SSI and Medicaid is what pays our medical bills. It's really important. Medicaid also pays services. It allows us to have care providers and things like that. So, but they have this limitation of $2,000. So we've always been stuck with this old rule of you have to have less than $2,000. And now we can have more. Okay. The other tool that we have are special needs trusts. Those are special needs trusts. There's the trust on the left, which we call a third party trust, and the trust on the right, which is called a first party trust. The third party trust is a trust that is set up. So for my son, I have set up a third party trust for him so that when I pass away, I can leave an inheritance to him, and that third party trust will not disqualify him from his benefits. I can put money in, his brothers put money in for him. He can't put his money in that trust. Only I can do it, or other people. That's why it's called a third party trust, but it's used for his lifetime. And when he passes away, if I set it up, I'm going to say who gets it. So I'm going to pass away. I'm going to leave the trust money into the trust. When he passes away, it's going to go to where I say. But during his lifetime, it's for his special need. Okay, whatever he needs. There are more limitations on what the third party trust can be used for than the EnABLE account. Okay. And the other rule about the third party trust is my son can never control it. That's why it works. He can never control it. All right. A first party special needs trust is, let's say my son got a settlement from some type and he gets his $100,000, or he gets an inheritance from somebody and it cuts him off from his benefits because now he's got more than 2,000. That's an account that we could take and put that money into this first party trust, meaning his money. But the rules on that one were, again, it's very limited on how it can be used. And when he passes away, the state will get reimbursed for Medicaid spent. So it's not our optimum way to leave money for someone when they get him as money by mistake. It would have been better, instead of getting that inheritance there directly to him, that had gone to the third party trust. But we were always had those two tools, third first party trust, but they need an attorney. It's expensive. You still need them. Mom and dad, if you're setting up planning for your child, you still need to use these tools to leave an inheritance, because the ABLE account is not something you leave an inheritance to unless it's less than $15,000. You can't really use it for that. So these tools are still important. So the ABLE account is this wonderful tool that allows us to leave money to a person with a disability, and we can leave it to them by saving for them. Okay. If we're going to leave them, if somebody is going to leave them a $5,000 inheritance, they might do that, but it probably isn't an efficient way to do it, only because if the person had already put more than that in, the 5,000 couldn't go into that account. Okay. So it's a living tool. The ABLE account is a living tool. The special needs trust is a trust very often used for inheritances and things like that. Let me tell you about the limitation of the ABLE account. An ABLE account is there to save money. However, there are two downsides to it that are really important to understand. If the account gets over 100,000, so let's say you're getting SSI, it's yours right now, it would be $794 a month. You're getting that benefit, and all of a sudden you have an ABLE account and it goes to $100,001. Your SSI would be stopped, not totally, but suspended. And until that account goes below 100,000, now remember, in some states, you can have up to 450,000 in there. Now, it's going to take a while to get to these numbers, right? If you can only put 15,000, stock market's good, but it's not that good. And so it'll take a while to get to 100,000 at 15,000 a year. And let's say it grows a couple thousand every year, but when you add to it, and then it grows, and so it takes you 7-8 years to get up to 100,000. Got to be careful if you have SSI and stop funding the ABLE. Now, the other downside of the ABLE is when the person with the disability has money in the ABLE and they pass away, the state has the right to claw back that money for any Medicaid that was spent for that person from the date the account was set up. So parents tend to, and individuals with disabilities tend to use this account as a working tool and not overfund it. Now, it's such a great tool. It is such a great tool to allow you to have more money than you could have had. And if you have plans for it, it's a really great tool. If you're just saving for saving, I would say match it up with the special needs trust, because the special needs trust, mom and dad can fund, other people can fund. If I'm the person with a disability, I can't fund the third party trust. So the ABLE account allows me to save money for myself. And if something goes back to the government when I pass away, hey, during my lifetime, I got freedom. I got some ability to use that. Okay. But I warn you that those are some downsides to it. Now, I didn't say there's a suspension on SSDI, or I didn't say there's suspension on DAC, which is a Social Security benefit I can get on my parents' record. It's only SSI that has a suspension rule. Okay. Important to know. All right. Some other things have happened to the ABLE account in the past couple of years. It's had some updates, and these are the updates. If I had a 529 account or people were funding it, or my parents were funding it, and I'm not going to school, then we knew that 529 account, if it's not used for school, has penalties. All right. If I take it out, just like this would be used if it's wrong, if it's used wrong. So I'm now allowed to roll money in a 529 plan to an ABLE account at the rate of 15,000 a year. We still have that 15,000 a year going in limitation. So I'm still allowed to use that, but I can roll it over. So it's a great tool. If someone has a disability, someone had been funding a 529 for them, we can flip that money into the ABLE, no tax consequences. There's also, when you fund an ABLE account, there's some tax savings at the IRS level that you have some tax credits for funding retirement accounts. This also qualifies for that saver's credit. But then last new thing that's been really nice is if you work, if you have a disability and you work and you want to save, but you're afraid to save because you have this $2,000 limitation, you now can put a little over $12,000 of your own earnings into this account, plus the $15,000. So who can the $15,000 come from? That money can come from mom and dad and brother and sister and aunt and uncle and you, the person with a disability. But additional $12,000 can come from me. So if I'm the person with a disability, I could put $12,000 in, and then another $15,000 could come from anyone else, including me. So if I have a disability, I could put $15,000 plus $12,000 in, or I could put the $12,000 in, other people could put the 15 in. So it increases how much can go in a year. And now you have some serious savings. Again, pay attention to if you have SSI, that limitation. It's a great tool. It's a great tool. Okay, so I wanted to kind of go through this chart. We have a few minutes yet, so I want to make sure I go through some charts and make some, give you some ideas of how they're different, and then we're going to go through some examples. So the first column says, if it's the individual's own money, how does it work? Well, the left-hand column says the maximum amount I can have in any of these accounts and still get my SSI. If it's my own money, it would be $2,000. If it's in a special needs trust, it's unlimited. If it's a first party trust, it's unlimited. And an EnABLE account, the most you could have is 100,000. Okay. Again, there's no maximum contributions into a third party or first party trust, but the EnABLE has the limitation of the federal gift amount. What can the money in my own name, if I have a disability, be spent on? Anything I want, no limits. What can the money in a third party trust money be spent on? A third party trust can be spent on anything that's for the benefit of the beneficiary. What does that mean? So the beneficiary is, let's say it's my son, and my son has a third party trust. What can we use that for? First of all, I control it, right? And I could spend it on anything for his benefit, meaning if I thought it was his benefit for me to give a charitable contribution to the place he's living and it benefits him, I could do it, okay? If I thought it was good for him to go on a vacation and he needed a caregiver to go with him, I could pay for both. So how is that different from the first party trust? The first party trust is the only thing for the sole benefit of the beneficiary. So if he was going on a vacation, it could pay for his vacation, but not his caregiver. All right, difference. There's more rules on the first party trust because that was that person's money. And the EnABLE account, the limitation is it must be disability related on the list of expenditures. However, when I talk to the people who run EnABLE, the question is always, did it benefit and did it enhance that person's life? So another big benefit is the third party trust says it cannot pay, it can own a home, but it cannot pay room and board. So the government benefits are to be there for room and board. And we've always had this problem that a person with a disability gets SSI of $794 and their rent is $600 a month or $800 a month, right? Rent's expensive. Or if their rent is $1,000 a month, how do they rent a place if their only income is $794 plus a little earnings that they make or whatever earnings they make? How can they pay for rent? So now what we can do is we can have the EnABLE account fund the rent, because EnABLE account, if they're paying rent, that enhances their life. EnABLE account is allowed to pay rent. So I'll give you a great example. My son lives in disability housing. It is subsidized, but it takes and he gets a low rent because he's disabled. However, he only gets SSI, and his rent that he had to pay for his unit would take all of his disability check, almost all of it. So he has very little left for food and other things he needs out of his Social Security check. But the rules were, I was not allowed to pay his rent because that would be giving him support. So what was he going to do? Use his own money for the rent and then for his food? He didn't have enough. So now what we can do is I can fund his EnABLE account and he can use that towards his rent and use his disability check for the other things. So it was a great tool. The other thing about third-party trusts is we always want to make sure, because as long as I'm around, I can help my son. I can help him by funding his EnABLE. What happens if I die? How does his EnABLE get funded? Okay. He can control his, if I'm not his guardian, he can control that ABLE account himself, right? So he doesn't control the third party trust. He doesn't control the first party trust, but he does control the ABLE if he doesn't have a guardian. So what could happen is I can, in my death, leave money into the special needs trust. And the special needs trust has language in it that says, I give my trustee the right to put $15,000 a year into his ABLE. So when we're looking at person's planning and we set up the ABLE, we want to make sure that the special needs trust has language in it that will allow it to fund EnABLE. So if you have an old special needs trust that you have set up for your child or your parents have set up for you, check the third party trust to make sure that it has language in that will be allow them, the trustees, to fund EnABLE. So you as a person with a disability would have access and control of more than the $2,000. That makes sense? Okay. Those are the key things I wanted to get through on this. Now, so I did this one so we can kind of see what are the different tools and what money goes where, because sometimes it's very confusing. So where can a parent fund, where could I fund my son's account? Well, my money can go into the third party trust. There's something called pooled trust. Sometimes people use pooled trusts. It's for people who can't afford to create third party trusts. It can go into the third party pooled trust, and it can also go into an EnABLE account. So where could my son's money go? When I see the words PWD, it's a person with a disability. Where could my son's money go? His money can't go in the third party trust. It can go into a first party trust. It can go into a first party pool trust, and it can also go in the EnABLE account. Okay. Is there a limit to funding? The only account that has a limit to funding is the EnABLE, and you can fund up to the maximum amount per year, 15,000. And when it hits 100,000, we have a problem with SSI. So there's a limitation. Who controls them? The person with the disability cannot control the special needs trust, but they can control the EnABLE money. So it's about self-esteem, right? They're putting their money in, other people are gifting them money. We always had a problem with grandma wanted to gift. Well, grandma can now gift into the EnABLE. Okay. And they can control, the individual with a disability controls their own money. It's a good for small accounts. So we need to have attorneys creating the special needs trust. It's a little complicated. It's good for funding at death. It might be good for funding at life, but the EnABLE account is great for funding at life and having a useful tool. Okay. And nothing is tax-free except for the EnABLE. So you kind of see all the differences in how the tools fit together. So let's talk about how we might use this. Third party, meaning other people's money. How could they fund an EnABLE account for us? Well, grandma wants to give a gift. Grandma's giving gifts to all her grandchildren. And then we say, oh, but she can't give gifts to Mark because Mark has a disability. What could grandma do? Grandma could do the same gifting, but instead of giving it to Mark, she could give it to Mark's EnABLE account. Neat way to make sure that all grandchildren are treated equally. Also, if someone doesn't have very much money, sometimes I work with a family who's very low income. They don't have very much, but whatever they do have is a very small amount, but they want to make sure it gets, a portion of it gets to their child with a disability, and they don't have the money to create a special needs trust, and it's a small amount. If it's a very small amount, they could leave that to an EnABLE account. Okay. Third party money. What about first party money? What is first party money? It's my money. I'm the person with a disability and it's my money. That's what first party means. Okay. I get a small inheritance. So grandma didn't listen. She didn't leave the inheritance she was leaving. She just left all the grandchildren $8,000. So I'm the person with a disability and I get $8,000. Whoops. Now I have more than 2,000 and my benefits are going to be hurt. I could take that $8,000 and put it in my EnABLE account if it hasn't already gotten too much money. Okay. If I don't have one, I would open it and put it in. I'd have to make sure how much money did already, let's say I inherited 8 and somebody had already put some money into my EnABLE. I'd say, well, is the 8,000 going to make it over 15? What's the amount I could put in there? I have to still be careful. Small settlements. Sometimes we have accidents and we get small settlements. A small settlement, sometimes you had to, get a $10,000 settlement and you have to go and create this first party trust and it costs you, $5,000 in attorney fees to save that small settlement. But now small settlements can go into the EnABLE account. The last thing we use it for a lot is somebody has earnings. And so you make money, you're working, you make money, you want to save for yourself. But if you save it and you put it in your checking account or you put it in your savings account and it's in your name, you lose your benefits. So now we're able to take, if I was going to make some money, I'm the person with a disability, I could put some of that money up to 15,000 a year and 12,000 a year of my own savings into that account. So when I have a problem, I'm able to transfer money from my checking account that has too much into this ABLE account. It's a great overflow place. So we know we always have to watch our $2,000 if we're on certain benefits. And the minute it gets to 1,800, we got to watch it and say, whoops, the checks we got, the supplement checks we got from the government this year, right? People were getting $1,200 checks or $1,400 checks or $600 checks. You have so much time to spend them, but who's going to track that you have to spend that check you got from the government to help us? And so, well, I got to hurry up and spend it. And maybe I'm not going to spend it on something I really need. I really like to save it. And I have a year to spend it, but in the year, I didn't really need it. So I can put it in my ABLE account. What a great tool. Okay. All right. So let's talk about actually using it. My state has a plan. Can I use it? So we need to look and say, if you're eligible, you can use it. So I'm going to talk about it from different states. I'm from Illinois. We have a plan. So do I have a disability? Was I diagnosed before the age of 26? Can I prove I'm disabled? We have to go through that checklist to make sure I'm eligible. If yes, now, if I'm in my state, if I'm in Illinois, I'm going to look and say, does Illinois, is it a beneficial plan? So whatever plan it is my state a good plan? Does my state have low costs? Does my state have good investments? Because inside this account, there's a checking account usually, there's a savings account, there might be a checking book you get on it. There's probably a debit card you can get. And then in addition to savings and checking, there's investment. So it's very much like a 401k, parents. If you're looking at this, it's like a 401k. So I can take and put that 15,000 in. Maybe I'm going to say I'm going to leave 5,000 in the checking and savings so I have access to money. I'm going to put, if I put 5,000 there, where could the other 10 be? Maybe the other 10, if it's for a long time, could be invested in growth assets because usually they have portfolios. Or maybe I'm going to put 60% in stocks and 40% in bonds. Just like a 401k. So I can invest it. I can leave some in cash, some in bonds, some in stocks. So planning that and how you're going to use it. Let's say the state I want to use has a tax credit. I'd be really interesting if my state has one. So if I'm in the Illinois and I'm going to put money into my son's plan, the funding I put in, Illinois gives me a state tax credit. Okay, so I got that benefit. So we look at that and say, what does that state offer? Now, if I live in Wisconsin, I would say, well, my state doesn't have a plan. So what do I do? So let's say I'm in Wisconsin, but some of the time I go to Florida. So I'm going to look to Florida and say, well, I'd like to use Florida's. Oh, well, Florida only lets Florida residents, and I'm not a resident of Florida. So I'm going to go back to Wisconsin and, well, what else can I do? Well, I'll look to Illinois or I'll look to Ohio. They let everybody in. So then I would compare those two states and say, which is the best plan for me? Okay, which has the lowest cost, which has the better investments. So I'm going to look at it from that perspective. Helpful? Okay. So there's two places that you can look at things, all right? The ABLE National Resource Center. So the ABLE Center is a national place that gives you all the rules by state, by how all the rules that are going to, what can you use it for? If you have a question, what could I use this money for? There's pages and pages of examples of how you can use the money. What else? You could use it for things like the ABLE site. You could say, okay, I want to know what states have plans. Okay, so you can go in there and say that what states have plans. You can also, if you look at the second tool, you might want to write these down. So the National Resource Center is ablenrc.org. So the ABLE was created through funding from the National Disability Institute and many other organizations. And it's the main place where each state, you can go to Illinois ABLE, you can go to Ohio Able, you can find in each account, each state has their name. So Ohio's is called the stable. Everybody's got their name that they named it. They're all following these federal rules, but some states have some extras, which is important to know. Some states have debit cards, which is really nice. If there's a guardian, the guardian gets a debit card. If there's no guardian, the individual with the disability controls it, they get the debit card. Okay. All these groups put these resources together, create this National Resource Center where you can go and research it. You can play around with what are the things you can use it for, what disabilities are on the compassionate allowance list, all that kind of data. Okay. So let's say you research it and you find out that you have 5 states you're considering. So now there's this other tool, EnABLE NRC, it's within that .org, and then hit a /state_compare. And you could put the 3 states that you're considering. So you say, okay, somebody told me Illinois is pretty good, somebody told me Minnesota is pretty good, and somebody told me that Virginia is good and Ohio. So you put them up and you put the 4 next to each other. You say, okay, now I'm going to look at which ones have debit cards, because it's really important to me. Which ones have a limitation? Some of them have come across on that payback, and I pay attention to some of that to say, okay, because they're only going to go after the payback from the time you open the account. But some states have come back and said, we won't go after state Medicaid. We'll only go after Medicaid waiver programs where the money's coming from the feds. Because remember, there's a federal program, and the federal program said we have to go after the funds. But the state programs say, you know what? We won't go after state funds. So they might not go after the things that are being funded for medical bills, but they might go after the waiver money that you get for services. So look at some of those things when you're looking at it for yourself. You might also look at which one gives you, the state gives a tax credit. And who gets a tax credit? So most times, if you live in the state, you're using your state's, check to see if they'll credit. So if I was going to use an Illinois plan or an Ohio plan, and Ohio was the very first one. So you see a lot of people using that because they came out first. And I compared to Illinois or I compared to Minnesota. If I live in Ohio, I may get a tax credit. But if I use Ohio's plan and I live in Illinois, I won't get the tax credit. So what should be most important to me? Okay. How are you going to use this? How are you going to use this resource? So if we talked about it's very broad, and pay attention to how much is in it. So I tell people, track it. So important thing having to do with this is thinking about when you look at those accounts and you say which one I want, and you decide, okay, I want to open an account. What does it cost? This is where else you're going to find it. Accounts vary by state. Fees for residents are probably going to lower than non-residents, which makes sense. And there's going to be investment fees as well. So usually there's a minimum amount. If you put 250 in, there might not be any additional fees. If you put so much in a month, there might not be fees. If you put in, if you choose investments. So just like any investment, I will tell you, buyer beware, know what the costs are. I will tell you that the consortium of all those states that have come together have come out with some really, I'm an investment advisor and I pay attention to fees so that people aren't paying too much, right? This consortium has fees that are really competitive. You can have, if you don't know a lot about investing, you could go in and pick a portfolio to say, I want to, this is for a long way away. I want to have 90% stock or 60% stock, or I'm afraid of the stock market, but I want to have something. So maybe only 30% stock. You can pick a portfolio. Now, an average cost of a portfolio manager would be 1%. The cost of these portfolios is like 0.3%. So they're very low. So pay attention to that. Look at the fees inside of the accounts. Okay. What else should you know? So let's say you decide which account you want and you pick a state and you decide how you're going to do it. They're all up online. So once you decide, I want to use Ohio's, find out the stable account, go on to their site, and that's where you open it. You don't go to the bank. So there's banks affiliated with it. So Minnesota will be affiliated with a bank, but you can't go to the bank and open it. You open them all online. Okay. You go online, you open your account. Once you start using it, I suggest, because it's just like a college account. When you use something and you put money in, that's great, as long as you have the limit. If you've already put too much, it's going to tell you you can't do any more. You already hit the limit for the year, right? You have to tell it who's this money coming from. Is that a third party or is it the earnings of the person? But it knows what you're doing. In most cases, it'll know that. So on the going in, sometimes don't get frustrated when you're setting it up. It might be asking you a lot of questions. Just if you need some help, call that state's director, call that state's office operations people. They're all pretty good at helping. You go in, you open your account, and you get your bank account, you get all the things you get with it. Going in is easy. Getting out and doing it the right thing of getting out. First of all, it can be a working tool. Okay, it can be your checking account. Matter of fact, Social Security allows the Social Security check to go directly there. So if you're having a hard time tracking when your account goes up too much, you can actually now the Social Security POMs, which are their rules, allows you to take your Social Security check and deposit it directly to the EnABLE if you choose to. But you have limits, so be careful, right? You still got your $15,000 limit. Don't waste it if you can have that amount in another one being saved for you. When the money comes out, it has to be an allowable expense. So tracking your expenses is important. Okay. So if I put money in, I'm going to take some money out for whatever I need it. I'm going to go on vacation. I'm going to buy a computer. Track your expenses. Create a little system, a computer system, or create a book and write down, I spent this on this date, and then put your receipts somewhere. Receipts are a funny thing because receipts fade. So if you can scan the receipts, just put them in a computer and then scan the receipts and store them. These are my receipts from things that I spent out of my EnABLE account in January, and then in February of this year, and March of this year. So if you ever do get audited by the IRS, you go, I got it. Here it is. I got all my expenses. They come back and say, well, prove to me that that was an expense that was a legitimate expense. You go, here you go. Print out your report. Here's my receipts. Okay, just some advice on that. Decide which plan is best, what fits for you, and then decide how the tracking works. What's best for you? Is it manual? Are you going to use a little QuickBooks system? Are you going to use some other tool that is really inexpensive? How is that going to work? Okay. And then once you start it, it's like any other savings plan, manage it. So if you start with 90% stock or something, and you see that it fell when the stock market went down, it's probably okay if it's money for the long term. If it goes down, you go, oh, I was going to use that for something next year, you're in the wrong portfolio. So manage your investments, have help. If it's you doing your own, get some help if you need it. I'm sure if you call some of the offices, they can help you. I'm sure there's other people that can help you make those decisions. Okay. If it's money that you're going to just put in there and then spend it right away, it shouldn't be invested. It should go in the checking or savings portion. All right. The other thing I want you to know as we wrap up and open up for questions is this is always changing. It's a new tool. Okay. So do not be afraid to use it. Use it cautiously, but don't be afraid to use it. It's a great tool. Be proactive about learning about it, read about it, call. We do. There's all kinds of websites where there's educational tools of how to use them. Some of the rules are still being clarified. People say, well, can we use it for this? Call the EnABLE office, call that EnABLE main office, call your state EnABLE office, wherever you're located, and ask them, can I use it for this? You'll get most of them are pretty good at answering the questions, or they will tell you, does it benefit your life? And if so, put it in, and how did it benefit you? Okay. So, it's new, and it's going to continue to expand and grow. We hope they'll let us use it for people who have been diagnosed after 26, but it's a very new, great tool. And there'll be constant, new rules, and I'm sure there'll be future webinars about this as well. So thank you very much for allowing me to answer some of your questions and explain EnABLE to you. I am going to open it up for questions. So I am at that point. If there's any questions, I will take some time to answer them. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Marianne. That was a very informative presentation, always jam-packed with great stuff. We did have some questions come in. So let's see. First, is there a minimum age that you can set an EnABLE account up?
No, I have people setting it up for a 1-year-old. If you have that, so again, it's just the disability has to be diagnosed. So I have people who have a child born with a disability, and some of the gifts that are being given to that child for the christening are ABLE account contributions. So there's no minimum age.
Wonderful, thank you. Does the maximum amount allowed for the ABLE account change if the individual is working?
No. So the maximum amount that goes in is, well, it depends what we're talking about maximum. Is the maximum amount annually change? Yes. So if it's the income going in, the maximum amount again is the 15,000 from other people and the person, and an additional 12,000, a little bit. Each state has that $12,000 limit be a little different. It's around 12 that the person with disability can work. Does the maximum amount you put into it, maximum amount as it grows, is that change? It's set by state. So if you're funding it and other people are funding it, and the state's maximum is 400,000, 400,000 will be the max that can go in total for that account. Okay.
Fantastic, thank you. And I saw a couple of questions come in kind of on this line. So one part is, if I already have an ABLE plan in my state, can I switch to another state while still living in the current plan state?
Absolutely. That's a very good question. Yes, you can transfer from state to state. So if you have one in one state and you say, oh, well, I found out that my state doesn't offer something I want, or the state I'm in, I used another state and it doesn't have a tax credit. Yes, you can move them to another state. So you open up the account, you say you're going to be funding it from another state and it'll ask you the question, are you transferring funds from another state? So yes, you can do that.
Wonderful. And then similarly, they just wanted to clarify. So if they live in a different state, they can open up an account in a different state.
Yes. So 3 kinds of states: states that allow only their own residents, states that have no plan, and states that allow anybody in. So anybody can go in a state where it's open, it's an open plan. Nobody can go into a plan where it's a closed plan, meaning only the residents can go in. So if I live in Florida and only Florida residents go in, I can get in that plan. I could also get into another state as long as they allow me. So you have to look at the state and say, is it for residents only? Or is there no plan? You can't do that. Or is there a plan that's broad, lets anybody in? So they either let everybody in at their own state. But if you live in a state where only residents are allowed, that person can go to their own or any other state that allows other people. Okay.
Well, thank you so much. So next question, can you convert a 529 plan to an ABLE account?
Yes, so it's called a rollover. So if you have a 529 account, now remember, a 529 is for college, and ABLE is broad, so it can be for college and more. So if you know the person will not be going, so sometimes you keep the 529 because you think that person might go to school. Okay, and so you could have the 529 and the ABLE account. But if the 529 is never going to be used for school, you can convert 15,000 a year of it to an ABLE. You can't roll it all over. You still have the limitation. So I always tell people, if you have a 529 for your child or your grandchild, and they're not going to, you're not sure if they're going to go to school, I would leave it in the 529. And if I wanted to put more in, I could also create an ABLE. But at some point, I'm sure they're not going to go to school, I would start converting that 529 into the ABLE at the rate of 15,000 a year. But if I convert that, I can't put any more money in the ABLE because the ABLE has that $15,000 max per year.
Fantastic, thank you for that. Our next question, do you have recommendations for how to find a local consultant or financial advisor that's familiar with the ABLE account?
They're kind of a weird group of people who do this. So are there financial advisors who know it? Yes. Are there financial advisors who never heard about it? Yes. So I do a lot of speaking to financial advisors. I would suggest if you have a financial advisor and they don't know anything about it, either ask them to learn about it or find an advisor who can help you with that piece of it. Doesn't mean you should switch advisors. If you have questions, you can always call our office. at the Protected Tomorrow's group, because we have advisors who know it. But if you want to work with a local advisor, you could always call us and ask if there's a local advisor near you. We will try to find one for you, but it's not something that's typically known by a financial and an investment advisor. This is one of the reasons. If the advisor has a family member with special needs, they're probably going to know it, right? Advisors don't get paid to do that. They get paid to be money managers, or they get paid to be financial planners. If they're a financial planner and they're paying you a fee to be a financial planner, they could probably do that for you if they're fee-based. If they're managing money, they don't make money doing that. And so they probably don't focus on it, but it's not across the board. They could be doing that for you because they want to do it as a courtesy. So I would just be, there's no database. Now, if you go to the Financial Planning Association's website, financial planners are listed and they will have specialties listed. If they have special needs as one of their specialties, they will know ABLE. Okay.
Well, thank you. And we've actually got someone asking for your information that you had on the previous slide. Would you mind we could just keep that on that side?
Sure.
Last couple of
Here we go.
questions.
Yeah.
So they know.
And if they're trying to reach me directly, it's mellert at protectedtomorrows.com, but info@protectedtomorrows.com, or the phone number will get me as well.
Wonderful.
Okay.
We had a question come in. What should someone who is disabled do about businesses that they own? Does this count against them?
About what they own?
They're wondering about the businesses that they own and if an ABLE account would count against them. We might need more context.
An ABLE account will not count against them so the purpose of the ABLE account is to allow you to have money and not count against you for SSI or Medicaid.
Thank you.
Okay. So it's considered, so what'll happen if you have SSI or Medicaid, it won't count against you for SSDI or Medicare because they don't care about your assets. But SSI and Medicaid do care about your assets. So they will ask, so when you're doing an SSI redetermination or a Medicaid redetermination, they will ask you if you have an ABLE. Now, if you have an ABLE, they will ask you for a copy of your statement. If they ask you for a copy of your statement, do not be alarmed. Just give them a copy of your statement. If it comes back and they say we're counting that as an asset, then you have to educate them. Okay, you have to send them something that an ABLE account is not a countable asset. And if necessary, you either get the person who helped you set it up or you get somebody in the ABLE to produce something that shows them it's not ABLE. But the Social Security records procedure manual definitely is clearly, so if that ever happens to you, you can just email our office and we'll send you a copy of the Social Security rules that says they are not supposed to count an ABLE account when they look at assets.
Fantastic. And then we have time for one more quick question. Do you know if other countries have anything similar to ABLE accounts?
You know, I don't know that. I know countries that's a really good question, and now you're going to make me curious. But I know that other countries have special needs trusts. So things like Canada calls it a Henson Trust, and each UK has it. Different states have something called like a special needs trust. Do they have an ABLE? I don't know that, but if you have a specific country that you're going to question about, email me because I'm a curious person and I would put somebody on it to find out. And now I'm going to go and find out for sure.
With some great food for thought there. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. It looks like we are out of time for questions, but feel free to continue in the chat. And I know we have Marianne's information on the screen right now. So thank you so much again. This was such a thorough and helpful presentation. I know we're getting a lot of activity in the chat with their gratitude for your time with us today, Marianne. And we want to thank everyone who joined in. You will also see a survey linked in the session page, and you're going to be receiving an email tonight with that survey link as well. And we would greatly appreciate any feedback that you have on this session. And then once again, we'd like to thank our sponsors and their incredible support of the 2021 Virtual SMA Conference. Don't forget, everyone, we've got a few evening socials tonight. The newborn screening social is actually going on right now. We've got the teens with SMA trivia night soon and the adults with SMA social, and you can access those events through your agenda. If there's anything that we can do for you, or if you have any additional questions, please email us at familysupport@curesma.org. Thank you so much again and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure.
Wonderful. Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Take care.